AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of a variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/automate. That's oracle.com/automate. oracle.com/automate.
Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We are doing it live and doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air right now, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com, and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Let's call it a well-fed rally on Wall Street to wrap up the month of July. Month of July already in the Wall Street history books. Tomorrow, August 1st, right? Am I right about that? Yes, indeed. The Dow coming in for a closing gain today of nearly 100 points, settling at 40,843. The S&P 500 up 86 at 5,222. And the NASDAQ popped today up 452 points, 17,599. The yield in the 10-year note has slipped to 4.03%. Stocks extending gains after the Federal Reserve, as expected, held the line today, left rates unchanged, and Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said a cut as early as September was a possibility at this point. The Fed Chairman said if the totality of incoming economic reports justifies it, a reduction in the policy rate could be on the table as soon as the next meeting coming up in September. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell telling reporters in his news conference after the Fed statement on the economy and a decision on interest rates came out today, he said we're getting closer to the point at which it'll be appropriate to reduce our policy rate, but we are not quite at that point. So in the meantime, the Fed funds rate remains elevated, the highest we've seen in about 20 years. Now, I'll discuss the Fed decision today, the statement on the economy, and the Fed Chair's news conference with Greg McBride, Chief Financial Analyst at Bankrate.com. The Magnificent One, NVIDIA, was in on today's rally, shooting higher by nearly 13% after Microsoft talked up plans to increase capital spending. Microsoft seems to be moving ahead with its big spending on AI infrastructure because it's seeing returns on investment there. The yield in the 10-year note, as I mentioned, slipped to 4.03%. Yields on government debt finishing broadly lower today after the Fed held the line on short-term rates, and looks like bond ETFs also had a big day. Airlines in focus, with Delta Airlines Chief Executive Ed Bastian telling CNBC today that he expects the cost of the information technology outages caused by the CrowdStrike computer software meltdown recently to be about $500 million. That's how much it's estimated to cost Delta Airlines. Delta Airlines shares moved lower, mostly to cover hotel costs for the roughly 4,000 flights that the carrier canceled following an erroneous security software upgrade by CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike shares also pulled back today as well. Price of oil spiking today as tensions in the Middle East have ratcheted higher. Hamas's top political leader was killed by a pre-dawn airstrike in the Iranian capital, Tehran, blaming Israel for the assassination that risked escalating into an all-out regional war. Iran's supreme leader vowed revenge against Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will exact a very heavy price from any aggression against us on any front, in his words, but he did not mention the killing. There are challenging days ahead, according to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel pledged to kill the Hamas leader and other Hamas leaders over the group's October 7th attack on southern Israel, which sparked the war in Gaza. The strike today coming just after the Hamas leader had attended the inauguration of Iran's new president in Tehran, and hours after Israel targeted a top commander in Iran's ally Hezbollah in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. I'll discuss these major developments in the Middle East today with Lisa Daftari, editor of the Foreign Desk. She'll be joining me live later this hour. Taking a look at the cryptos now, we see a Bitcoin pulling back more than $300 at 64,916. Ethereum moving up by 21 at 3,242, and Doge at the moment at 12 cents. Crypto industry participants have been cheering over Republican presidential nominee President Donald Trump's speech at the Bitcoin conference held in Nashville last week, where the former president said he would build a strategic Bitcoin reserve if he's elected in November. We did see Bitcoin spike over the weekend, but it is now pulled back to around 64,000. We'll be keeping an eye on that. And on this program, of course, we talk to the biggest fans of crypto as well as the harshest critics to give you the balanced view on what's happening in the crypto space. So we look forward to speaking to one of our crypto folks here later this hour as well. Investors awaiting the quarterly earnings reports from Microsoft and Advanced Micro Devices after the closing bell today. We did get them, and mixed results. Treasury yields are moving lower as investors geared up for the Fed's latest policy decision. And Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's news conference today helped move the market. Regarding oil, let's take a closer look at that now. We see oil futures hovering at around, let's bring up the latest here now on oil. Moving higher by 57 cents right now, 78.48 a barrel. Gold also higher today in the face of the uncertainty in the Middle East, up nearly $20 at $2,492 an ounce. Looks like the price of gold possibly kissing record highs today, $2,492 an ounce here at the moment. Got as high as $2,494 and change during the trading day today. So year-to-date, gold has now moved up more than 20%, and over the past year, gold has moved up about 26%. We're keeping an eye on the precious metals, of course, also tracking the price of silver, which has been along for the ride this year as well. Let's bring up the latest here on the price of silver. It has moved slightly higher today, up 27 cents at $29.21 an ounce. And platinum, which has been lagging behind in the precious metals rally this year. Let's see if we can bring up the platinum price here now. And that has been under $1,000 lately, and right now indeed is up $1.30 at $987.70 an ounce. Among the airlines, Delta Airlines stock did pull back again today, down 21 cents at $43.02. It's been under pressure ever since that epic meltdown involving the CrowdStrike erroneous upgrade that they had. United Airlines shares pulling back $1.19 today to $45.42, and Southwest has been in the spotlight lately on its change in boarding policy, now going to a ticketed situation, assigned seating rather than the open seating they had previously. Southwest pulling back 10 cents today at $26.94 a share. This is Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. In case you missed it, we had a big conversation yesterday with Steve Forbes, a giant in the financial world and media world as well. In case you missed any of the shows, be sure to bring up the Mottek On Money podcast, which is available at KABC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Over the past week, we also talked to Dr. J. John Najarian about what's happening in the crypto space. Ken Winan's a frequent guest on this program, also on some of the recent shows as well. And be sure to bring up the 790 KBC website, that is KBC.com, and bring up the Mottek On Money podcast in case you missed any of the shows in recent weeks. Let's take a look at what else is happening here today. We're watching, of course, what's happening in the Middle East, and we're expecting to get a thorough update here shortly from one of our Middle East experts. We also want to make sure we get you updated on what's happening on the market action today. A big move in the bond market, and that, of course, mercifully impacts the mortgage rates out there as well, which have been pulling back. The yield on the 10-year note is the one that impacts the mortgage rates. So we are seeing mortgage rates ease recently. Let's see if we can bring up the latest on the mortgage rates right now. Looks like mortgage rates fell today on the news that the Fed held the line on short-term rates and signaled that the Fed might be cutting rates in September. We're watching mortgage and refinance rates expected to drop when we get that survey on Thursday. It looks like mortgage purchase rates have not made huge jumps since last week. Some are up while others are down. And the most significant shift is with the 5/1 ARM rate, which is down 15 basis points to 5.66%. According to the latest report from Yahoo Finance. On the other hand, most mortgage refinance rates have actually increased. The Federal Reserve today making that important announcement today, and the Fed chairman himself signaling we might see a rate cut in September, and that helped to put downward pressure on the yield of the 10-year note, which impacts those fixed rate mortgage rates. How low will mortgage rates drop after the Fed cuts rates? We'll be talking to the experts about that, of course. Among the experts from Mortgage Grader, Jeff Lazarson, a frequent guest on this program. We're going to invite him back very soon. With Fed rates holding steady over the past couple of years, mortgage interest rates have stayed high overall, even hovering close to 8% at one point in recent months. And those high mortgage loan rates, coupled with a high cost of living and inflation, have led many potential home buyers to pause their search for a home and a mortgage to buy it with. In recent weeks, though, there have been some welcome news for potential home buyers, with mortgage rates falling to a 4-month low, and looks like set to go even lower this week. With that Fed rate cut now on the horizon for September, that would help the situation with mortgage interest rates as well, since the Fed funds rate impacts the adjustable rate mortgages, and looks like we are seeing some downward pressure finally on mortgage rates, with affordability as well as availability being big issues here, of course, in the Southern California real estate market. How much would a Fed rate cut impact mortgage rates? Well, we're going to be talking to the experts about that this week as we watch what's happening with the Freddie Mac survey due to be released tomorrow. Fed Chairman Powell putting rate cuts on the table, but doesn't say much about what comes next. But already the next Fed meeting is in September, and the market cheered that. If you're just joining us, the Dow rallied today, especially tech names rallied, with the NASDAQ closing up 452 points, selling at 17,599. The Dow moved up 99 points today at 40,843, and the S&P 500 ended with a closing gain of 86 points at 5,222. Taking a look at some of the big movers today, we see topping the list of movers for the S&P 500, Vista Corporation moved up more than $10 at $79.22 a share. We see Match Group moving higher as well by more than $4 at $38.14, a jump of just over 13%. And NVIDIA, a big mover today on the upside, the Magnificent One closing up $13.29 at $117.02, a jump of just about 13%. Among the losers today, shares of Humana, the healthcare giant, pulling back nearly $43 today to $361 and change, a plunge of nearly 11%. Another big loser, Verisk Analytics, moving back today as well by more than $24 at $261 and change, a drop of more than 8%. Another big drop today, shares of Bunge Global SA down nearly $10 at $105 and change. Now let's get the latest on your ride this afternoon here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. Good afternoon. 790 KBC welcomes Jim Brewer, Survival with Laughter Tour, coming to the Canyon in the Gura Hills on September 8th. Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you are caller number 9. Call right now, 1-888-795-2222. Tickets furnished by the Canyon, where music meets the soul. Well, big day for the stock market today. The Dow was up more than 400 points during the trading session today. Stocks rallied after the Federal Reserve kept interest rates unchanged as expected, and the Fed highlighting some inroads against inflation today as it approaches the Fed's target of 2%. It's still well above that 2% reading. Traders also went big into tech names, with the NASDAQ closing up 452 points, 17,599. The Dow ended higher by just about 100 points today at 40,843. The S&P 500 saw its best day in months, up 86 points to 5,222. At the session high, the Dow was up 455 points. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ were sharply higher as well, before pairing the gains at the close. During the Fed chairman's news conference today, he said if data continues to give the Fed confidence that inflation is slowing, it could be ready to move to lower benchmark interest rates. In his words, he said, if that test is met, a reduction in our policy rate could be on the table as soon as the next meeting in September. The Fed policymakers struck a slightly more optimistic tone in the post-meeting statement, saying that in recent months, further progress has been made toward bringing inflation down closer to the Fed's 2% target. We'll be discussing the Fed decision and what's happening with the Fed statement today and statement on the economy. We'll be talking about that with a friend at Bankrate.com. Mega cap tech names took the spotlight today. NVIDIA, the Magnificent One, putting in a magnificent performance today. NVIDIA shares gaining nearly 13%, recovering some of this month's losses as NVIDIA posted its best day since February. NVIDIA soaring as better than expected results from rival advanced micro devices fueled optimism in the semiconductor space. Other tech names, including Apple, Meta, and Amazon, also moving higher. Microsoft pulling back more than 1% on disappointing quarterly cloud revenue. Boeing also in the spotlight. A lot of people have Boeing stock in this area since Boeing, of course, had a major presence here in Southern California. Boeing added 2% today after announcing a new CEO. That's very big news here. The aerospace company also reported a wider than expected loss and disappointing revenue for the second quarter. Healthcare giant Humana, meanwhile, moving lower, as I mentioned earlier, down nearly 11%, this on weak revenue guidance. Even with the tech revival today, we saw the NASDAQ still ending July in the red, moving lower by just about 0.8%. Month of July now in the Wall Street history books, the S&P 500. Now that the dust has settled, we can tell you moved up by 1.1% for the month, while the Dow posted a 4.4% gain for its best month since December, as the blue chips finally roared back to life amid investors' rotation into cyclical corners of the market, as we spoke with recently Gabriel Wisdom, among others, about the great rotation that we've seen recently. Stocks moving higher today after the Fed kept the interest rates unchanged. The Russell 2K small cap has been in the spotlight lately. Those small cap names have been moving up, briefly touching 2,300 today. The small cap index still on track for a gain of more than 1% after dipping from that high water mark earlier. Taking a look at what else is happening, we see Morgan Stanley analyst Christine Lewag said in a note to clients, according to a CNBC, that the selection of Kelly Ortberg to replace Dave Calhoun at Boeing should be a positive for the stock. Lewag was not the only analyst to express confidence in that hire. Benchmark's Josh Sullivan described Ortberg as a known and respected quantity within the aerospace community. And Bank of America's Ronald Epstein called the new leader a very capable executive with a good understanding of operations, the commercial aerospace business, and the defense business. Boeing shares did rise about 4% during the trading day. According to CNBC, bond king Jeffrey Gundlach said the Fed should have considered cutting rates today. He flat out said, I think they should have cut today, quite frankly, on CNBC's closing bell. Jeffrey Gundlach, of course, based here in Los Angeles, calling the news conference by the Fed chairman today reassuring for the market, viewing Fed Chair Jerome Powell as very well prepared. He also said it's laughable, in his words, that some investors seem to suggest that a quarter-point cut in September could influence presidential politics, given its proximity to the November election. Starbucks has been in the spotlight this week, and many on Wall Street have been cheering Starbucks better than feared third-quarter financial results, according to CNBC. This was another big story this week. The coffee giant's adjusted earnings per share was in line with analyst estimates, but it missed on revenue this week, but it maintained its full-year outlook, anticipating low single-digit percentage growth in revenue and earnings per share growth in a range of flat to a low single-digit percentage. B of A analysts breathed a sigh of relief after the report, while Goldman Sachs said it sees an attractive risk-reward opportunity at Starbucks. Both also maintained their buy ratings on the stock. Bill Ackman in the news lately. Pershing Square USA announcing today that it is withdrawing its previously announced plan to go public by an initial public offering. Looks like they've released a statement. Bill Ackman himself releasing a statement. The billionaire hedge fund manager said, while we've received enormous investor interest, one principal question has remained: would investors be better served waiting to invest in the aftermarket than in the IPO? This question has inspired us to reevaluate PSUS's structure to make the IPO investment decision a straightforward one. We will report back once we are ready to launch a revised transaction. Bill Ackman saying this week that the investment vehicle would raise about $2 billion in capital after he initially set an IPO target of $25 billion. Reuters, citing a person familiar with the situation there at Pershing Square, earlier reported that Pershing Square had expected to sell up to 40 million shares, priced at $50 each, and begin trading on the New York Stock Exchange on August 6th. Let's get the latest news for you now on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. The price of oil moving higher today as tensions in the Middle East ratcheted up. Airlines Delta and United announcing the cancellation of planned flights to Israel for several days amid spiraling tensions with Hezbollah and Iran and anticipation of potential large-scale attacks on Israel in the coming days, according to the Times of Israel. Delta canceled its flights until August 2nd. United canceled its flights until August 6th. Reports indicate the cancellations left tens of thousands of Israelis here in the U.S. Without flights at this point. The cancellations by United and Delta, respectively the second and third largest airlines in the world, could spark a wave of cancellations by other airlines. We're following this developing story closely. Iran, meanwhile, has pledged to avenge the killing of Hamas's political leader in a missile strike on Tehran early today. Hamas and Iran both blamed the killing on Israel, which remains quiet on the issue. The assassination coming hours after an Israeli airstrike in Beirut killed the Hezbollah military leader in retaliation for the terror group's missile strike that killed 12 children. The region is bracing for the possibility of a major escalation between Israel and its regional foes Hezbollah and Iran, as world leaders have warned of the destructive potential of all-out war. This according to the Times of Israel. Israel has said it does not wish war, but is ready to act against ongoing attacks against it. Joining us live now, Lisa Dovtari, editor of the Foreign Desk, who's following all these developments closely. Lisa, give us your reaction to the latest developments here today.
It's interesting. Am I surprised? Not so much. This is something that Israel has done in the past. If we've seen them take out nuclear scientists, we've seen them take out generals, very pinpointed, very strategic. They have not come out to claim responsibility. I tweeted earlier today that if we're waiting for Israel to claim responsibility, that's not their thing. Their thing is not to flex. Their thing is to survive. And that's what they're going to focus on. They are not looking for this to be an escalation, but that's obviously the way that it is being perceived by the Islamic Republic regime in Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah as well. Will this lead to an escalation? It will definitely lead to a retaliation, but the thing that both sides have in common, actually, that is not being talked about is how much the Islamic regime in Iran does not want an escalation either. They don't even want to insert themselves personally into this war. That's why for 45 years they have grown their proxies to do the dirty work for them. So, the Islamic regime does feel humiliated. They do feel that this was a direct attack on Iranian soil, as it was. But do they want this to lead to something much, much bigger? No. So they will probably they will send the message through a retaliatory strike. There will be something, as they have threatened in the last 12 hours, that it will be an attack towards Israel like they did in April. But I don't think that this will lead to Iran or Islamic Republic actually inserting itself in the war.
On the air live with Lisa Dovtari, editor of the Foreign Desk, Middle East expert and expert on Iran. We did hear today from Iran's supreme leader himself vowing revenge against Israel. That raid you mentioned, that attack by Iran on Israel back in April, was well telegraphed, as we were talking about back in those days. And what about what could happen this time around? What type of action might be expected?
Yeah, the Islamic Republic, through its proxies, their strategy in attacking Israel this time around, meaning since October 7th, has been to involve Israel and the IDF in a war of attrition. That's why we didn't see Hezbollah and Hamas attack at the same time. Hezbollah attacks have been trickling every single day since October 8th into northern Israel, but we didn't see them escalate to the point where they could have bombarded Israel from all sides. And then that includes insurgencies that are being propped up by Iran's regime in Syria and Iraq, as well as the Houthis in Yemen, as well as Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So they have Israel surrounded. What could this potentially look like? Maybe something similar to what we saw back in April, where they just have, a symbolic show of 300 missiles going into Israel. It's a barrage where, we want to do damage. Or they might think that, well, that didn't do enough damage because the Iron Dome and David Sling and other technologies that Israel has was able to stop that. And we actually want there to be some sort of collateral damage to show that we are flexing and this is who we are and we're going to continue. The other possibility is to allow Hezbollah to now escalate and start this war. This is what has been predicted by myself and many others since October, that we would see a full-fledged war with Hezbollah in late summer, and that's exactly what we're coming upon. Tomorrow is August 1st. So this is right on time and right on message. What's going on in terms of the IDF's decision to launch this attack against is very interesting. Presumably, the IDF would have had many opportunities to hit this leader or many other, Sinwar or anyone else in Qatar or in Gaza or wherever they travel throughout the Middle East, which has been many times since October 7th. But they chose to make the strike while he was inside Iran. And that is it's a 2-for-1, as I've been saying on media today. It's a 2-for-1 because not only were they able to get the Hamas leader, deliver a message to Hamas, but also to say to the Islamic Republic, we have a catalog of all your most valuable players and we can reach them and we can get them just like this because you're vulnerable. Your airspace is vulnerable and our intelligence and military might can actually make these types of strategic and targeted attacks on individuals. So again, business as usual for the IDF to be targeting individuals who are dangerous, who are existential threats to Israel. This was one of their main players. For those who are talking about him being the more moderate face of Hamas, there is no moderate face of Hamas. I think it's a very silly comment to make. An interesting differentiation to make between Sinwar and Haniyeh, but the bottom line is, had one of them actually been a moderate, there would have been a ceasefire by now. There would have been a deal. The hostages would have been returned. And the fact that for 10 months nothing has been done, it tells me that they weren't ever interested in making any kind of deal. And with this guy gone, I don't think it's going to make any difference going forward.
On the air live with Lisa Dovchari, editor of the Foreign Desk. What else do we know about the raid that killed this guy in Iran? He was killed by a missile strike, as has been reported today, which hit him directly in a state guest house where he was staying in Tehran, according to the reports that we're getting today. Any other details about exactly what happened there today?
Yeah, he was in Iran for the inauguration of the new president. He met with the new president of Iran, doubling down on their support for one another, and was in a veteran home in northern Tehran with his security detail when this happened, which many people are raising eyebrows and saying, well, was someone in on this? There are many questions, but the bottom line is it's a net positive with another major deadly terrorists off the map for right now. And with regards to intelligence, I think this is something that Israel has always done. I don't think it's anything new. Again, taking out nuclear scientists and other individuals all throughout the Middle East and inside Iran as well. When they believe that there is a threat, they go, they use their intelligence and military might to do these very strategic hits. And again, not meant to escalate, but to do pinprick attacks where it will give them a huge advantage.
And this assassination coming hours after an Israeli airstrike in Beirut, which killed the Hezbollah military leader after that horrific missile strike, which killed 12 children in Israel. Tell us about this tragedy, of course, and this aspect of it.
Yeah, that was a horrific attack into the Druze community in northern Israel by Hezbollah over the weekend. We didn't see much global traction about that, but Israel, of course, had their cabinet meetings. Bibi Netanyahu, who was in Washington, D.C. for his congressional address, had to rush back in order to make a decisive, take decisive action against Hezbollah that launched that attack. And they were able to find the number 2 guy in Hezbollah, Shukr, who is actually responsible for the death of 240 Americans as well in 1983. So a big thank you from the United States to Israel for taking out somebody who has a long history of terrorist attacks throughout the region, but again, showing the capability that Israel has to do these very targeted attacks on individuals who are responsible for masterminding these terror attacks throughout time. Of course, everyone's talking about Sinwar. Will he be now in hiding? He's the only man left who has this kind of visibility and that kind of track record. Now, remember, he was the actual mastermind behind October 7th, somebody who understands IDF intelligence and might very, very well. So it'll be interesting to see how this progresses, what the retaliation will be, and what this means going forward for getting the hostages back and actually seeing this war come to an end.
Lisa Dafchari, editor of the Foreign Desk, Middle East expert. We'll keep a line open to you as we follow all of these developments closely. Lisa, thank you very much for taking the call here again this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thank
you very much. And out to the freeways we go now, live on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KABC. Good afternoon. Let's call it a well-fed rally today on Wall Street. Stocks moving higher after the Fed held the line on short-term interest rates, but signaled that a rate cut could be ahead next month. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of just about 100 points at 40,843. The S&P 500 moved up 86 at 5,222, and the Nasdaq popped higher by 452 points, 17,599. For the month, the S&P 500 climbed 1.1%. The Dow jumped 4.4%. The Nasdaq actually pulled back 0.8%. As some of the big cap tech names came under pressure this month, including NVIDIA. Today, though, NVIDIA, the magnificent one, jumped nearly 13%, helped by a rosy sales forecast for AI by Peer Advanced Micro Devices. That stock gained 4.3%. Joining us live now to talk about the Fed's decision on interest rates and the big news conference held by the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell today. Joining us live now is Greg McBride, Chief Financial Analyst at Bankrate.com. Greg, great to have you with us here this afternoon.
Great to be with you, Frank. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. And you were glued to every word the Fed Chairman had to say today. So give us your big takeaways from the big announcement today.
Yeah, I think they've teed things up to be able to cut interest rates at their next meeting in September, provided that the inflation data that we get between now and then cooperates. I mean, we've had a better trajectory on the inflation data the past few months, and the Fed just wants to see a little bit more of that before they've got the confidence level to start cutting interest rates. If that data comes in the way it's expected, things are looking like they'll start with a quarter point cut in September. But, again, a lot of economic data between now and then.
Right, including the jobs numbers, which the Fed also pays attention to, in addition to the inflation number. And it looks like we're seeing some weakening on the job front. Tell us more about that.
Yes, and I think what was of particular note is Jerome Powell said he doesn't want to see it weaken further. Their statement made 4 different wording changes that pertained to acknowledging the weaker info that we've seen on the job market lately. We've seen unemployment go up. It's now up to 4.1%, still historically low, but that's up from the mid-3s where it had been. And we've also seen an increase in the number of long-term unemployed. Those have been out of work 6 months or longer. That's been increasing. We get another jobs report Friday. I think that's one of the key details is not just, are we continuing to see job growth, but how long is it taking those that are unemployed to get back into the workforce? I think that's going to be a key indicator of just whether the job market is really weakening or whether it still has some strength to go.
On there live with Greg McBride, Chief Financial Analyst at Bankrate.com. We call that monthly jobs report from the Labor Department the big enchilada of monthly economic reports. And what do you expect we'll get on Friday?
Well, we are expecting to see continued job growth, just at a slower pace. About 175,000 seems to be the consensus estimate. Unemployment rates expected to hold steady. I frankly wouldn't be surprised if it ticked up a bit. The one number I'm going to be really zeroing in on is going to be that long-term unemployed. Is that a situation that continues to deteriorate? Because that's usually a warning flag of more weakness to come in the job market.
All right. In the meantime, with the Fed holding the line on rates where they are, that, of course, is the Fed funds rate impacts borrowing costs for businesses as well as consumers. And we're seeing basically credit card interest rates at record highs. They've maintained that for the time being, and consumers are certainly feeling the impact of all this, right? What's the outlook on the credit card interest rate front?
Well, borrowers really need to continue to attack that high-cost credit card debt, utilize those 0% and other low-rate balance transfer offers. Because the thing is, Frank, once the Fed starts cutting rates, that's not going to be a panacea. Interest rates took the elevator going up, but they're going to take the stairs coming down. That credit card rate that's at a record high right now, it'll come down, but it'll come down slowly. So you can't sit back and wait and expect falling interest rates to bring you some kind of a windfall. You need to remain aggressive about attacking that debt, transferring balances to lower rate cards so you can really turbocharge the debt repayment.
Right, and of course, inflation has really hit people very, very hard, and we're hearing, oh yeah, inflation's not that hot anymore, and so forth. But it's up about 25%. The price is up about 25% over the past 10 years, right?
Yeah, all this focus on the rate of inflation, on a year-over-year basis, really sort of ignores the cumulative impact that we've seen, where household expenses are up, as you noted, 25, 30%, some cases even more over the past few years. And that's the budget reality that households are dealing with month in and month out. So we're in a position now where the increases in prices have slowed. Wage growth is outpacing inflation. But if you think of it like a foot race, inflation was running ahead for a time. And even though wages are running faster now, they may not have closed that gap entirely. Households don't have the buying power now that they may have had 4 or 5 years ago. And until they get that buying power back, you're going to continue to see these pretty dour sentiment readings on the part of consumers.
Right. Consumers not feeling that great, and that's another important point in this consumer-driven economy. And all of last year, it was widely expected that we'd get a recession, which never arrived. Is there new recession talk now based on the jobs numbers we're getting, and what else is happening these days?
Well, that risk never completely goes away. The odds have certainly diminished. They're still very low. I think if you look at it on the basis of probabilities, the most likely outcome is that soft landing where inflation comes down to 2%, but we continue to have consistent economic growth. And that's, 12 months ago, that was not the leader in the clubhouse. The expectation this time last year was that the recession was going to come, and that 2 out of 3 economists were forecasting that. Now, fewer than 1 in 3 economists is expecting a recession in the next 12 months. So the odds of that soft landing have increased dramatically. I think the data certainly continues to support that. But again, there's always going to be those risks that never completely go away.
Greg, thanks very much for that thorough assessment. As always, Greg McBride, Chief Financial Analyst at Bankrate.com, live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back with more at 4 tomorrow afternoon right here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
It's kickoff time, and Believe podcasts are here to get you ready for the season.
This team, they looked to figure it out, and they said, okay, we got a shot at this thing.
With Believe, you get immediate reactions, game previews, and expert analysis from all 32 teams, plus all of your favorite college teams.
This is a true junior that we're talking about.
Sideline to sideline, end zone to end zone.
The running was good. His size is unbelievable.
Just search Believe. That's BLEAV podcast, wherever you listen.